The founders forgot that we had medical liberty.
We seem to be losing by taking the side of the middle. And we seem to constantly be losing.
I think Trump has made some kind of arrangements with Russia.
This person has made the allegations that they were a man.
If there's content that's borderline, that's content that we basically will not.
There is no second best. There's no second best crypto asset.
Let's talk about science.
I respect you, and I have a great deal of appreciation to you, JF, because in a time when everybody was attacking me, when Sargon doxed me and smeared me, you were the only one who gave me a platform, and you were very kind in helping me put the truth out there.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to JFG Tonight. How are you doing, people of the regular chat? We'll be talking about the new revelations of Candace, some of the news. I'm doing good. I've been eating this weekend the McCrispy Triple Pickle, a Canadian special, I think. You may have it at some point, I guess, in the US, but I think it's an especially Canadian thing for now. It's a McChicken with crispy pickle, deep fried, fresh pickle, as well as pickle sauce. I really like the idea of the tangy aspect of pickles mixing in just an excellent burger. And I've been taking pictures of all of these food phenomena, and I'm including them in my book. So it's great to write a cooking book because every time I notice something, it goes in. The setcast says this is good because they normally won't give you nearly enough pickles even when you ask for extra. Yeah, when we were kids, there was such a thing as removing the pickle from the Big Mac. Some people were doing it. Now I've come eventually to appreciate the pickle in full. And now, yes, I would want more pickle. Devon says, I was thinking of Coach earlier with his System Pig rant. Oh, yeah, Coach was a great guy. And we got some breaking news. Dubinsky on Coach Red Pill says, according to my appeal, the court has ordered the Prosecutor General's office to open a case against SBU agents under Maliuk who were involved in the abduction and murder of American journalist and blogger Gonzalo Lira. So that means that on the U.S. side, I believe, if I understand this this publication correctly, on the U.S. side, there would have been pressure for an investigation to be opened against the people who were closely related to the keeping of Coach Red Pill, his surveillance, his monitoring, and his kidnapping. So I don't know if it comes from, did it come back in the days when it happened? Did it come under the Trump administration? But there is some degree of care in investigating what happened here. Because I've been a witness to this crime, I would say. I've exposed everything I knew about it on Twitter then, but I've been directly speaking with Coach Red Pill back in the days where he was about to be killed. And clearly he first fled, if I remember, everything I remember include the fact that he first fled a bunch of assassins, and we were throwing money at Ukraine, and now Ukraine had paid up assassin gangs on the streets, getting people like Coach Red Pill. He successfully escaped them, eventually got caught by the SBU and the Ukraine police forces, got imprisoned once, was liberated at some point, and was extorted in the process. They took his money, they forced him to reveal his passwords, his accounts, his Patreon. They tried redirecting that money to criminal gangs, and he was tortured under the nails and eyes, and he was in a bad state and eventually died of something related to his lungs. But that was basically a minor health issue, but that was let to build up as he was tortured. The setcast says the Big Mac is an excellent sandwich. It will outlive many burgers. It may even outlive McDonald's. It deserves to be in your book. Absolutely. I will feature many fast food items. I was just talking to an Australian guy because I have to do research and I have to go beyond what Grok can tell me. So I can ask Grok, what are the Australians eating? But Grok, you know, it's an AI. It's going to have its biases. It's highly influenced by the internet. So it might miss some of the low-level food phenomenon that happens that everyone knows about in a given area, but somehow AI doesn't know about. So I've been speaking with an Australian, and he introduced me to this massive tradition of covered meat pies, topped meat pies in Australia. So they have these little meat pies that are handheld, and they put stuff on it. They put nachos, guacamole, sour cream. They put fries, ketchup. They put all sorts of fried stuff on them. They put sauces, and so you have a meat pie that is covered into fried stuff. It's amazing. I didn't know about this, so now I'm featuring it in my book. Sean says, Papa, who invented Greek foods? Are Greeks originally white? Well, there's a big question as I write my book, White People Food, about whether you consider the Mediterranean trends to be white. And I'm extremely careful when there's actually 2 points of contention in my book where I'm trying to jungle with the facts and trying to interpret. So it's the Hispanic cuisine and the Greek cuisine. So the Greek cuisine, its problem is that in its modern expression, it integrates so many traditions that actually are traceable to North Africa and the Middle East, that this is where you see just through the food, without even knowing about the genetics and the demographic change, you would already have a look, if you just look at the food, about whether this is white food. Same thing happens at another level with the Hispanics in America. Is a taco white food? The problem is that the concept of what is white ultimately boils down to, in America, there is a distinction between whites of America, the true whites, and white Hispanic. And it's actually questionable to what degree is the entire South of America even genetically Spanish and genetically Portuguese, because they were colonized, but they've done massive interbreeding with racially diverse populations. And so you have there it goes beyond whiteness. It's not because your country was discovered by a somewhat white country like Spain or Portugal, that you become a white country. And a lot of the food traditions, therefore, I may not put in my book. So it's like I don't want to be exclusive when I write this book. I want to be as encompassing as I can. But when I come to the Greek question, it's like I'm going to introduce a couple of recipes from Greek tradition. But every time I do the research, for example, some people in the chat were telling me, JF, grape leaves wrapping rice, that is a Mediterranean tradition. Now, the thing is, I start the research, and it's like, yeah, I know that Greek people are eating this. I know that Greek immigrants into the North America are eating this. But the tradition is traceable to Middle Eastern, North African traditions. And so it's not white food. It's food that came from non-white and eventually got integrated into a not-so-white population. So those are the kind of decisions I have to make on an everyday basis. Sean says, are white Greeks basically Italian, Jewish hybrids? Well, the thing is, no question that Greece has had white people inhabiting it. But at this moment, and with the current culinary traditions that they carry, they look more like a they look more like a Middle Eastern tradition. And so most of their stuff is not going to make it in my book. Now, I tried to find specific recipes that would come from the whitest portions of these. Like you see the paella. Paella is one example that can pass. Because you go into Mexico, you're going to get served a paella. And you go, in fact, in the southern US, you go into a Mexican restaurant, you're going to get served a paella. Now, okay, so it's Mexican, so is it white food? Well, the paella has a tradition going back to Spain. So it's attached to the white heritage of Mexico that you can get a paella. So those are the tough decisions. And AI is not going to help you on this one. It's like, Grok, is paella white? I have to make a decision. Is paella white? And so I have to understand all of the roots and branches that what led to a meal. And in general, if I can trace that the majority of the history of this meal has been from the outside world into the white world, I don't consider it white food. But the Australian meat pie, see, southern Australia could have been influenced by Aboriginals of Australia, could have been influenced by recent Asian migrants, but no, the meat pie comes from England. It was carried by white people to Australia. They made a whole fast food tradition around it where they put fries, and that is white food. That is white. Defenestrator says, I've never seen paella in a Mexican restaurant. Well, I did. I mean, I did a Mexican inspiration restaurant. So was it a genuine Mexican restaurant? I don't know. But I certainly did. So that is from my own observations of the world. Rodilacid says, I would say that Greeks are white, and here's why. Tzatziki is amazing and should be added. It's basically yogurt, and Africans are lactose intolerant. If your ancestors ate/drank milk, you might be white. Yeah, definitely tzatziki is amazing. And yes, definitely it already has a place. In fact, in many recipes of my book. When will I release my book? It's always treacherous to say these things because I once said that the Moral Signal would be released in a few years, and see, it's not ready yet. But yeah, my goal would be I would love if I can make next Christmas before, if I can release it in maybe September, October, so that people buy it in large swaths for Christmas gifts. I think it's going to be the best Christmas gift that a based woman could give to her based husband, and to give herself too, because I'm writing this book for these white traditions to survive. I'm really going from a anthropological perspective, and I'm like, some of this stuff will disappear. In my lifetime, I had access to Montgomery cheese. COVID comes in, import rules change, production changes. Now I can't have Montgomery cheddar. Now I can't have Val de Leon from Spain. Now, so it's you're always very, very close to losing a tradition. Image is a little fuzzy tonight. You say, okay, my settings appear to focus. Doesn't seem fuzzy here. Maybe there's some bitrate issue, but it's looking good for me. It's we'll see. I'll look back at the show tomorrow and I'll judge. Cat's Dead says, Jeff writes books meant to last for centuries. Oh yeah, that is how I see it. The 6-7 meme cannot and will not be stopped. Elementary students are given tickets by cops for saying 6-7. It's now against the law to use the word 6-7. I was talking about this recently. The 6-7 meme is high penetration. My own children, who I homeschool, and I protect from so many of the negative culture out there. Somehow they know about the 6-7 meme, and when I told when I was teaching to my daughter about after 6 we have 7, and she's like, "Pa, I know 6-7," and she does this little hand gesture. So all the kids across America are now they keep saying 6-7, 6-7. It's an interesting trend, but I don't think it's a good idea to train young people to receive tickets for saying something, especially something that's not hurtful. 6-7. It's a meme based around absolutely random stuff. It doesn't mean anything. Some people have sent me info that says, "Oh, well, it actually comes from a gang of criminals that were using 6-7 to shame the people they were killing or whatever." But I'm not sure. I'm not sure that the meme comes from just a guy who was on a motorbike and he had a 6-7 shirt and he says 6-7 on a TikTok video. And the spreading of the meme comes a lot from this guy. I cannot attest whether it is ultimately linked to criminal gangs. In any case, the use of it in schools is not at all tied to violence. It is really just a meaningless meme, which is what kind of makes this meme charming, is that it means anything. Catty Cat says, "Hi, JF, hi." Googs Grizzle says, "Gravy makes things another level." Oh yeah, there will be lots of gravy in my book. Sadie talks about mashed potatoes, absolutely. So Candace has been revealing a couple of interesting information tonight, and she has been. Back then, I was very critical of when she goes too crazy, and when the hypotheses don't align, and it's like, oh, well, you could have known that the trapdoor stuff is fucking ridiculous. You could have known that the angle of shooting questioning is very unlikely. You could have known that the camera gun theory is stupid. So I've been critical of Candace back when she was rising with all these theories, because it's like we shouldn't dismiss conspiracies. If something is a conspiracy, we should want to label it properly and discover it. But at the same time, we should be efficient. We should be efficient in our search for conspiracies, and we should be intelligent about it and know that whenever you invoke a new theory, it involves kind of an entropic cost. It's like, what should be non-random for this to be true? And there are some theories that you can dismiss them at least as a working hypothesis, because they're just too out there. They just require too much things that haven't been proven yet. And you need to keep these theories away so that you can concentrate on the serious stuff. And one of the things that even in my critique of Candace, I had identified as, whoa, this is interesting. I had said back then, hey, her identification of an Egyptian plane, it's not conclusive, but it's interesting that this Egyptian plane, which is a military plane of some sort, has been active in a way where you could think that they were maybe involved in either the killing of Charlie Kirk and then fled, or just monitoring of Charlie Kirk and just perhaps attending to the speech on college. Could be. And I said, I hope that she continues investigating this. Now, what she reveals tonight in live 1 hour ago is that this Egyptian plane that she was at first debunked, okay? But I didn't get into the debunk because I'm all for holding Candace to standards. But the debunk that she was targeted with was, oh, she got the hours wrong. She didn't translate in UTC time. So instead of the plane leaving after Charlie Kirk was shot, the plane actually left just before Charlie Kirk was shot, if I remember. And this became a viral trend on Twitter where the pro-Israeli side was pushing very, very hard on the idea that she has been completely destroyed. Well, wait a minute here. The plane is of interest whether it leaves before or after the shooting. It's the correlation in time with this plane's location and the event that is interesting. That interest is maintained whether they left after or before. So I believe that this debunk was an example of a culturally viral false debunk, an improper debunk, which is why I didn't join it at all. And back then, my position has been, it's still interesting. Still interesting. Let's pursue this. Now, a autistic pregnant woman, apparently, because Candace has a lot of female fans, an autistic pregnant woman has spent her last month tracking the correlations of location between this plane, this Egyptian plane, and Erika Kirk. And amazingly, found that this plane tends to go where Erika Kirk is. Isn't that amazing? And so the whole correlation between TP USA and Charlie Kirk was there. But what's interesting about this plane is that it is even headed toward places where Erika Kirk is when Charlie Kirk isn't. So that is a very, very interesting drop. Let me just play a part of Candace's live stream from tonight.
Kansas, Missouri, Nebraska, Delaware, and Utah. And it's a pattern that she believes is statistically not random. I'm telling you this information has been completely verified. I am showing you this on a spreadsheet now. These are all the instances in which this plane, all 68 instances that this plane crossed with Erika. And I'm also going to say this includes overseas as well, okay? So my instant question becomes, why didn't turn...
So here you have the Erika location. So for example, she's in New York, New York. Event reason, media appearance, TP USA engagement. So this plane makes the route from Cairo to Paris and then to New York. Then you have, let's say, Erika Kirk in Utah for a TP USA Campus Media local event. The plane flies from Missouri to Cairo. So there is a list of interesting correlation between where this plane is and where Erika Kirk is at any point in time. Very interesting, because the reason I've been, out of all the conspiracies I've been finding this plane interesting, is that I've learned in my life that if you follow the money, you follow the probabilities. When I predicted that Nick Fuentes was about to be assassinated, I predicted this 1 month or 2 months before the assassination attempt happens. I was noticing flows of money that go into leftist terrorism, anarchism, etc. I was seeing those flows of money result in right-wing personalities being targeted, and I was like, wow, the leftists are going hard, the deep state is going hard. And that is how I came to be able to predict that Nick Fuentes was about to be targeted by a murder. It is truly through statistical appreciation of money flows. Now, Micron sends a super chat. He says, the RCMP is coming for you. Well, they're not. They're not, because they had an occasion to come from me about a month ago, and they absolutely did not, which means I am safe here. I am under good police forces in Alberta, good government that is not targeting ideological dissidents and political people. Butane Bear sends $14. Thank you so much. He says, under which condition would Greta Thunberg become eligible for JFG insemination? Greta Thunberg, in order to get inseminated by me, would have to go through the entire process of female selection that I've put together across the years. And it's a fine process that is formed by a single step. She would have to send me an email that says, hi, JF. So that is, those are the conditions under which she might get an insemination pass. That is probably, that is basically all that she would have to do. She would have to send an email saying, hi, JF, how are you doing? And then the magic of the world would happen. You know, I've actually, as part of my cookbook, I've been working on my Swedish cuisine. Greta, if you are ever interested, I can prepare you artsoppa with pancakes and lingonberries. Just a little item of winter cuisine for Greta's heart, Greta's Swedish heart. All right, so going back to the money flows. Egypt is a very, very corrupt country that has been basically subject to colonialism of a very, very modern form. American empire, Israeli colonialism. So Egypt basically has been submitted through American money. You can look at the countries where we send the most money. Egypt is up there. So they were bought out because they were a point of contention in the whole Israeli and Gaza, not the last 3 years of it, but whole Israeli and Gaza history over the last 50 years. Egypt has always been, you know, it's directly connected to Gaza. And they are therefore a natural place of convergence against Israeli interest. And, you know, Israel is basically this neighbor that's set up there to be kind of a gatekeeper of commerce in the region. And of course, the Jews being who they are and Israel being what it is, they have progressively modified Egypt by buying out its leaders through massive deliveries of money and progressively corrupted the American government into having a kind of psyop onto Egypt program, where Egypt was their support for Israel and their cooperation was bought out across the decades through massive cooperation opportunities with the American government. So if you tell me that there's something that Israel would want to do in the world, something like 9/11, something like killing JFK, or something like killing Charlie Kirk, but of course they wouldn't want this to be attached to their name, I would certainly think that Egypt is a likely culprit to be involved in any kind of messing of that kind. Proxy messing for what are ultimately Israeli interests, but through layers of obfuscation. So when Candace came with this story of, hey, there's an Egyptian plane, I was like, that is interesting. Because in the same way, by the way, in the same way, Israeli interests are bound to some aspects of the story of 9/11. The dancing Israelis, that kind of stuff. So we have evidence that there was a network of spying onto the US that was operating through bizarre shell companies, but that was formed by Israeli agents that were living in the US, starting little shell corporations in the US, and that on the year where 9/11 happens, and in the years previous to that, they were mapping and studying American government and corporate buildings across the U.S. And then we have this witnessing of this Israeli group that eventually was dancing or celebrating or kind of excitedly filming the crash of the planes into the towers. And they eventually went back to Israel and became public personalities. They appeared in the media telling their story of dancing on 9/11 as they saw the planes crash into the buildings. So all of this to say, and then 9/11, what do we find? What do we find when we look into who took those planes? Saudi agents. Now, you have to understand that 9/11 is tainted by Israeli interest, but as it appears to be a proxy job. What my conclusion about 9/11 is there appears to be a proxy relationship here between higher ups who wanted these towers to be blown up for some reason, and then we can talk about the motives and whether it was to throw America into endless wars in the Middle East, maybe. But leaving aside the motive, the pattern that I see here is high up interest linked to Israeli intelligence, physically present in Israel after the events and after the dancing moment, but acting somehow or benefiting from the actions of a bunch of Saudi trained agents. And Saudi Arabia is another Egypt. Saudi Arabia is another one of these countries that was pushed through money and through international geopolitical relationships by the US under Israeli interest controls to become more pro-Israeli. So I'm starting to see a pattern here, which is, okay, there's the Israeli interest and their extent of geopolitical control and influence over the Middle East is expanding physically. They have more and more, as Nick Fuentes describes and many other describes, they have more and more control over the neighboring countries. And why is it? Well, historically, you know why that is. It's because every other country that would be around Israel, but that wouldn't be sympathetic to them, they had the US go at war with them. Iraq, Afghanistan, Israel has bombed Lebanon themselves. So basically the US has been doing the cover job for freeing Israeli control over many of the countries adjacent, so much so that a significant class of the elite of these countries are basically just bought out. In the same way you get into Ukraine, I was seeing recent social media posts, you get into Ukraine, you find a high-level politician, the cops get into his house, and he has $7 million USD packed into his jeans and his little furniture pieces and locked in with a homemade lock. So that is what American money does to the world. It's like, okay, there are elite classes that are completely sold out to this trickling of money. And Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Ukraine are some of these countries where the trickling of that American money is absolutely subversive of the whole culture, is destroying these places, and is creating corrupt networks of politicians that enrich themselves not from serving their own people, but for serving outside interests. So all of this to say, when I see an Egyptian plane linked to military intelligence of some sort being co-localized with Erika Kirk, I'm all ears. I'm all ears, Candace. This is very important. And you can see why, out of all the clownish conspiracies, this one I'm interested in. You can see all of the history I've talked about for the last 10 minutes. That's why this is extremely interesting. Why is an Egyptian plane co-located with Erika Kirk that much? I'm not even implying Erika Kirk herself here. Maybe Erika Kirk doesn't know, but she would want to know. I would want to know if when I travel to San Diego to go get some lunch at a restaurant, I would want to know if an Egyptian plane happens to land in San Diego and that Egyptian plane follows me around everywhere I go. If I was to bet my life on it, if I had to make a choice, I would bet you that Erika Kirk knows exactly why an Egyptian plane is following her around. Maybe it's a donor-related network. Maybe it's people who are in Egypt putting a lot of hope in a political relationship that's continued with the US, and they think that they're into Trump government and all is Erika Kirk. If I was to bet, I would bet you with 80% chance that Erika Kirk knows exactly why there's an Egyptian plane apparently following her around the western U.S. states. Go Away says she was having an affair with an Egyptian general, in my opinion. I don't necessarily think so. I don't think that's a viable. That's an interesting hypothesis. Go Away. So, other things that are revealed in Candace. Well, Candace makes a beautiful case tonight that she was targeted for a psyop of decredibilization, Operation Mocking Plane, she calls it, and absolutely she was. I mean, it's amazing how much of the thousands of likes I was seeing then on these pro-Israeli Zionist posts, and it was all fluffed up by the algorithm, and somehow Grok decided out of nowhere to make a big case about the debunk of Candace, which, as I've talked about earlier, was not a satisfying debunk. It's not because someone gets one detail wrong in a whole story that the story isn't interesting. So extremely botched Operation Mocking Plane, and she's very good at going through. And there's this bizarre pastor in the life of Charlie Kirk who's, yes, is invoking the biblical values to basically tell us to shut up and tell us not to investigate. Very interesting case laid out by Candace here. And here you see the kind of advantage and interest of the approach of Candace of releasing little by little. Because she's telling her audience, come back for the rest of the week because I know so much more. And that has, I kind of hate this from a journalistic, ethical standpoint, but you understand why Candace is becoming the greatest public speaker in America right now. Why her show is, she's making close to 200K live viewers on a relatively, calm Monday. And she's being viewed by millions of people. And that's because she has mastered the art of, I released this important information. Now let me see how people react. And then she farms it again. And then she comes with more details. Very interesting strategy from an audience kind of cliffhanger perspective. Basically, Candace is resurrecting the cliffhanger tradition that existed in the cable TV, ad-based and scheduled world. This is fascinating to me because, cliffhangers have been existing in the golden era of TV production because they were constrained by ads and by schedule, and you only have 1 hour and then you have to wait the next week. But Candace is bringing that back in an era of long-form streaming, which is kind of a cultural innovation, if you want my opinion. Another thing that Candace Owen drags attention to, which is also might be related to the Egyptian plane, but certainly is telling about this whole phenomenon that happened to TPUSA and the flows of money within it. And again, I am fascinated by the flows of money. They are very important. Generally, when you understand where the money is trickling, you eventually find, if you don't find the guy who did it, if you don't find the criminal who did it, you find exactly who has benefited from and why they wanted a crime to be committed. You find cui bono, basically, who benefited in the end. Because clearly there are many branches of hypotheses in which you could think that someone wanted Charlie Kirk dead. Some billionaires who were unsatisfied about his direction with respect to Zionism. Some internal TPUSA people who were seeing him waver on an issue that they were considering they will lose their job because of it. Or some people who wanted literally to socially engineer TPUSA and take over, which we've seen again and again in big tech, Twitter, almost all of Elon Musk's companies, PayPal. All of these were subject to takeovers, hostile takeovers from combined actions of executive and events of the world's unfolding that eventually stripped an original free thinker from the CEO position, which is exactly what we have with TPUSA. Charlie Kirk was probably too honest. And I'm not saying here that he was a shining exemplar of virtue and free engagement, but he was probably not dirty enough in his own self-conception that he was that to be useful as a CEO for people who wanted to take TPUSA over. So what Candace Owens reveals also tonight, which I find interesting in the money flow, is that up to 2022, there are 4 different denominations of TPUSA. One is called like America's TPUSA. One is called TPUSA Endowment Fund. One is so they have different shell companies, which is fine for something of that size. It's not alarming in and of itself. They had 4 different incorporations of nonprofit corporate structures. Now, very importantly, there was something like 10 to 11 millions before 2022 that was always sent to the TPUSA endowment. So the endowment, its function was to just store that money, invest it on the stock market, and this helps your nonprofit to survive inflation and to without necessarily relying on donors at all points. It helps your company continue its, even if it's a nonprofit, it helps it continue its task. Now, that means there was a lot of power and a lot of money hanging onto the head of Charlie Kirk. Again, you have a massive reason why someone would want Charlie Kirk dead. Many people would want Charlie Kirk dead. There's all this money, and it will be tied to the path of Charlie Kirk as long as Charlie Kirk is alive. But once Charlie Kirk is dead, this money gets shuffled. But in any case, in 2022, this transfer to the America's Endowment of TPUSA stopped. Brutally stopped, abruptly stopped. And suddenly another shell corporation has been created, which is something like America's TPUSA. And then you can see the money flow was subtracted from the endowment and was rerouted to America's TPUSA. And interestingly, as Candace lays it out, TPUSA has not filed Form 990, which you have to file for nonprofits, so that we could see where this money is headed. What does it do in America's TPUSA? And the failure to file that form happened somewhere in the 4 months that preceded Charlie Kirk's assassination. Now that's very interesting. Now there are extensions, as Candace points out. There are extensions to filing that form, but certainly TPUSA has usually been filing that form, and now they are in absolute breach of obligation by not having filed those forms. And you can think that perhaps this involves Charlie Kirk saying, no, we're not going to file that form as long as I'm not told where did this money go or what exactly was done with it. Or you can think that there's something shameful on those forms that the accountants do not want to reveal to the public or to the American government. No matter what is the reason for why the form wasn't filed. It's interesting that basically TPUSA was evolving. Charlie Kirk had created this alternative shell company to reroute money, and now this money is flowing in the dark. We don't know where it is. Whereas we would have known if it had happened in past years, because the 990 were filed for all of their subsidiaries. But for this year, we can't know. And that's important. That's an open interrogation mark. So the way I see the money flows is we have Israeli interest money flow from the US doing proxy effects into Egyptian corruption and the corruption of the local political class to Israeli interest. We have Charlie Kirk shadow money flows that are still not available because they're being hidden or they're being withheld. And they appear to show a different direction that Charlie Kirk took in 2022, which is to reroute from an endowment fund to something named differently. Was it also for endowments or was it for other purpose? They also point out that on these forms, they report 0 employees, but where is this money headed? Is it being held in stocks? Was Charlie Kirk or Erika Kirk involved in some sort of deals where they would invest in certain things with that money, where they were donated? They were receiving that money in the form of donation, but where was it headed? We don't get to see it because the forms haven't been filed. All of this is very interesting. Ty Rogerson says, because JF is not normie coded. Kevin Bacon says, why would we need a black female to represent us in media when we have people like JF who have proven they have integrity? Well, I don't think we have to see Candace Owens as our representative. I think that Candace Owens is just part of the free voices out there, and therefore she can come out with some things that are of interest. And sometimes she may miss it or fail it, but we have to reward her and praise her when she does good. And of course, this is not a case where she did the research on the plane, but it's actually one of our audience member who did this. And so now we get this bizarre co-location history. What is this plane doing? Wherever there's money, there's something weird going on. These people, like Erika Kirk crying with her 5 gigantic rings and all of her jewelry and her overdone hair and her $1,000 makeup face. This is money. And where there's people don't become rich for no reason. And it's actually very rare that you become rich because you have made some actual innovation. Like you're a brilliant chef and you rose through the free market and you delivered the food that people wanted. That's not how you become rich. You become rich when there's an Egyptian plane somehow hovering around you. You become rich when you're hanging with Jeff Epstein. You become rich when you do these weird dealings all over throughout your life, and somehow you accumulate that money your way because you're useful to very, very sometimes evil people. That's how you end up wiping your tears with 5 golden rings. So all of this to conclude this story, and then we'll see the regular news. Very interesting what Erika Kirk came up with. Ked's Dead says Gordon Ramsay became rich being a chef. Yeah, but see, Gordon Ramsay is an exceptional man. He didn't just become rich becoming a chef. He is very good at being a chef, but he transferred it into a TV cult, and that is the Gordon Ramsay difference. I think that if Gordon Ramsay had just been a chef in a single restaurant, I don't think he would have become rich. He may have done a chain, he may have expanded, but ultimately what leads to the Gordon Ramsay little difference is that he transformed cuisine into a TV cult. Now that is where you'll make money. If you can become a cultural icon of anything, really, you're gonna transfer your profits are gonna go up. Crooks PayPal alias. So we are learning about Thomas Crook, the person who shot Trump in the ear, and we are learning that he was basically a leftist with furry fantasies and identifying as non-binary. So that is one more of these kind of furry hanging people. One involved in the attempted assassination of Trump, one involved in the actual assassination of Charlie Kirk. Now, it's not necessarily that the furry community will make you into a murderer. I think it's something more complex. I think it's something along the lines of the furry community attracts special minds, and they are more likely to eventually fall for whatever leads them to murder. Ben Shapiro crashing out on Steve Bannon for praising Nick Fuentes. Ben Shapiro has not recovered yet from his shock at Nick Fuentes' mainstreamization.
Here was Steve Bannon over the weekend, for example, praising Nick Fuentes. Again, the reason this is happening, we should point out, is because there is an attempt to glaze pretty much everybody who is on the anti-Israel, and yes, Fuentes is just an anti-Semite, anti-Semitic side, in order to shift policy priorities away from what President Trump is attempting to do.
Alex Jones had a debate with Nick Fuentes and Dinesh D'Souza. And you see right there the laziness, the lack of argument, their attitude that they just own this. Fuentes takes this guy apart brick by brick. It's a full takedown. Because the kid shows up, he's prepped, he's ready. Not only is he on point and he's always on attack, he happens to have something called facts, and he just overwhelms Dinesh. Dinesh goes back, and it shows you this old guard who has nothing.
Again, it's fascinating to watch as all these people make quasi-allies of people like Nick Fuentes.
Ben is having a tough ride in the modern world, let me tell you. Wasn't it easy, Ben? Wasn't it easy when you were owning SJWs with facts and logic? But now you're in a new generation type of informational war, and now you would have to make arguments, but you don't. So you don't have anything. All you have is ad hominem, really. And, how can you be friends with Nick Fuentes? Well, those are guilt by association, ad hominem arguments. Why don't you take the time, Ben, to try to lay out your steelman of Nick Fuentes? That is what's needed right now. Ben, to help you psychologically, lay out what the best case is for Nick Fuentes' IDs. Not for who associates with him, and not for how can you do this, and not for how can you say this, and trying to find the worst thing he's ever said, but try to do a steelman of Nick Fuentes' position on Israel and the US, and you might be surprised how logical it is, really. Genesis says, JF, are you concerned with your children learning the French language? Not particularly, because I don't plan a return to Quebec. So I'm raising my children mostly in English. Sometimes, the family life, I have some French reactions still. So I think they will have some degree of understanding of French, but they will be 90%, 95% English, because I just, there's a reason why I fled Quebec. And I believe that you have the responsibility to carry your improvements of your own life onto your children. So, for example, when my ancestors left France to go to Quebec, they were telling me, in a way, you'll be better off there. So don't go back to France. And I would say the same about Quebec. I've reached a much better off life in Alberta. I love life here. And so I wouldn't want my children to be attached to French culture in a way that forces them back into a place where they won't have their individual rights protected. In fact, Quebec is getting worse and worse. They're trying a constitutional project under the guise of nationalism. But when you look at the constitutional project, it's essentially making Quebec an independent communist jurisdiction within Canada. And they will have, basically in this project, if it goes through, they basically have the abortion right instituted as a constitutional right. And all of the leftist things that you could want and think of, they're all packed in there. So you know how this is going to turn. It's going to turn into one more reason for Quebec to become even more fascistic toward its families, toward males, toward whites. So it's not looking good for the future of Quebec. And so, although I am attached to Quebec French culture and Quebec French cuisine, I don't have necessarily an interest in keeping that attachment in the continuation of my genes. Yeah. America has a shortage of companies that are willing to understand that to be relocated to become a rent slave in some gay mega city is not what most white men aspire to. They keep dunking onto white males and they're saying, they're not good, we can't employ them, they're not applying. And I've been saying again and again in the last few weeks, stop complaining about this, you're not interesting. You've shit on us, you ridiculed us, you make us pass through these interview processes that are all meant to make us feel bad about being white. And it's like, can you check box whether you're something in that list? Can you at least be Native American, Islander Pacific maybe? It's like your entire process is hostile to white males, because we know when we check Caucasian that that's a no-no. We know that you would want us to check any other box. And we know that we don't have a fair hearing anyway. So it's not like you even know what white men can produce. You don't know because you haven't hired us, because you've missed an entire generation of white youth that got rejected because you wanted to diversify the whole demographic at scale from 18 years old to 60 years old employees. So you put this all on a single generation of white people. And we ended up realizing that we're never going to be hired in these things. So so Elon Musk and Ford, you should ask yourself, one, is the workplace hostile to high testosterone male minds? Two, do you have in your workplace these complaints where women are complaining about you and they get you fired with false allegations? Do you have these trust and safety teams and HR resource teams that are supervising what is said in the workplace, and as soon as you say something manly or something relatively just a little bit provocative, you get you get the call or you get the interview process. Is the interview process feminized and mentally punitive for giga chads? So a lot of males, I'm an example of this. I hate this process. I can see that I don't belong in corporate culture because you made it so anti-male. I'm like, I'm gonna try just placing food in a grocery store. I'm gonna try to be successful with my books on the internet, but I can't cock that hard. I can't. You have to leave place in the corporate world for originality, creation, edginess at time, or else you're gonna lose most males. Kuvi Clown sends a super chat. Thank you so much. He says everything runs smooth when whites run everything. Oh yeah, the world is. This is partly why I need to write this culinary book. It's because we're gonna lose a lot of this. Everything is gonna be baloney. We're going to revert to baloney culture because you need white people in place to control the direction of a society, because the world wants you to eat curry. That's the default state of the world. It's everything goes back to sauced curry chicken and rice, because those are the ways you can feed a human in the most efficient way, corporatively and socially. It's so easy to maintain a society where everyone is eating curry chicken. And so I have to develop a culinary book so that the people of the future can know, hey, there used to be cheese curds on the convenience store counter in Quebec. There used to be meat pies topped with fries, crinkled fries, and ketchup. There used to be foie gras. There used to be all these things. Kobe Clown says we are... I don't even know what your question means, but okay, thank you. As the city around the corporation evolved into a cesspool of leftist depravity, that's another question the corporates should ask themselves. Because never forget, employment is not just about money. It's not like theoretically, oh, you're giving 100K a year. Wow. It's how much of that 100K will I leak to the fact of your location? Because I can live with 30K. I can live with less than 30K if I'm at the right place. That's something I discovered traveling around and living, let me tell you, developing the smarts of the street, traveling, being dependent on a given corporation, being in North Carolina at some point, Texas, Prince Edward Island, Quebec, Chicago even. I've lived in Chicago for a month. And then Alberta. I've discovered that 100K in some places is like zero in other places. Because the bottom of your expenses, if you're in San Francisco, it's going to be so incredibly higher that you might as well make zero. You might as well make zero if you're having just 100K in San Francisco. The bottom is different depending on where you are. Kobe Clown says, Jeff, I was referring to the hiring process about race. Oh yeah, definitely. This is one of the questions that they will ask. It's like you stand there as a white male and they're like, what race are you? What do you identify as? And yeah, they are using, and on top of it, sometimes they write something like, this will not be considered in our hiring process. And you're like, I think it will. I think it will. I think it will. We have enough witnessing of this sort at this point.
It was also, it was very clear internally you can't hire white men. Or if you do, there's a lot of friction to hire white men. I'll put it that way. Like, is it impossible? Maybe not. But, sometimes that was explicitly stated. It was certainly very obvious. You have to go out of your way to not hire white guys. And my sons are white guys. So I'm like, what am I doing? I'm building a company. I'm fortifying a future that is going to censor and exclude my sons from employment. Like, this is not the future I want to build. And, you know, as the scales sort of fell from my eyes, and like, I have to admit, like, it was convenient for me to not notice these things. I was getting paid a lot of money, you know, like, so I'm at the top of the list of people who need to re-examine their motives.
So this guy was at Apple, and it was very clear in the culture, you don't hire white men. Here we have a body that was discovered on Mount Everest. So sometimes there is snow melting, and it exposes bodies that have been dying there for many years ago, sometimes decades. And they are eventually recovered because you have to wait for whatever area to free itself from the snow. And so sad thing that people are going to die at the Mount Everest. I'm not fascinated at going onto mounts in particular. Pepsi abruptly shutters 60-year-old Florida factory and lays off 500 workers as sales slump. So the soda maker company shutting down in Florida, not enough sales, all right. What else do we have in the news before we conclude the show? People are continuing to talk about this Dasha Nekrasova. I don't know what to think about her. She's the one who lost her Hollywood opportunities and whatever. She was in Succession. I don't know what Succession is. Is it a TV show? Is there still TV? What is Succession? Is there still TV? Rick Verger says, JF's backdrop is looking great. Oh yeah, I can't wait to finish this other side. But I have to get into chopping more squares, and I've decided that I would go in a reddish black tint for this side. So you're going to have a slight variation of the tint between the two panels. I can't wait to see the final result. Genesis says, JF, Andrew Wilson is under fire for his wife having 3 baby daddies. Do you have an opinion? Well, I've seen some of the scenes where he got criticized for this. And live, he had the host call his wife, Rachel, to defend herself, because in the end, Rachel's position, and I fully agree with Rachel here. Rachel is saying, I'm not promiscuous. I've had husbands. I was loyal to them, but I continued building more families and more babies when it didn't work. So I moved on to the next husband, and I continued making babies. And now I'm with Andrew, and I'm making babies. I think that's great. That's great. I don't know who's to blame in the failures of Rachel's marriages, but it's possible that it's the males. And even if it's her that would be to blame for the marriage not working, I prefer a woman who continues making babies rather than I'm taking the sperm from a single male and then I'm just, because that is a strategy that leads you to disappear evolutionarily. If you just make a single baby, you're not at replacement rate. So all in all, I don't consider that Rachel is promiscuous. I consider that she has engaged in many marriages, but have you looked at me? I mean, Rachel is like an amateur in promiscuity if she's doing this, because I have probably 50x the history of Rachel. So I've been. It would be absolutely insane of me to criticize Rachel. Because that would mean I'm 50 times more at fault. And I know in my personal life, I know that it's women who have made it impossible. It's women who have made it impossible to stay with the same, because I'm deeply monogamous. My dream for all my childhood up to adulthood and up to still to this day was always to have a single woman forever. But the world will not give you this. So I fully understand Rachel's history. You don't have control over this. The world is fucked up, and they are broken, and they don't want long-term relationships. So maybe Rachel was faced with this in her own life. And so that's the side of Rachel. Now on the side of Andrew, why wouldn't Andrew recycle this usable material? I mean, you have a woman, she comes with a baggage with children. And her children will be some kind of a cost in your life, where you will have a family life in which she has to share her parental duties with children who are not genetically yours. But the decision that a male has to do when he sees a single mom like this is, can I get more of that relationship where it doesn't matter this small cost of having to be a stepdad to 2 or 3 other children? And the answer depends on the age of the woman. If the woman is 38 and a single mom, then at best you have one baby, and you barely you're not even certain you're gonna have it healthy. But if the woman is like 25 and a single mom, 28 and a single mom, then you have 7 to 10 years of reproduction with this woman. And the cost of being a stepdad in those circumstances are not massive. So I have nothing to judge from this relationship. In any case, it's like, it's not even our business. So to begin with, the fact that this is supposed to be taken as scandalous is kind of weird, and it's bizarre. It's a bizarre that it wouldn't matter. Like, what if Andrew was a sadomasochist who enjoys handcuffs and automated penis machines, like this bench with a penis with an entire mechanism that does. What if that, and the case that is being made against Andrew and Rachel is not even that much. It's just that they had misfortunes in their love lives, but now they are together and happy. So it's actually hard to see what I'm supposed to be shocked at here. I don't see it. But then, these people are always telling you something like, oh, well, you should be a traditionalist. Aren't you a conservative? But it's like, oh, well, first, you're not a conservative. So who are you to tell me what conservatism is? Secondly, conservatives are dealing with a modern society where they may have committed mistakes in the past, or they may have found themselves in situations they had zero control over. I didn't have any control over whether these women were leaving me or whether they were committing massive breaches of loyalty that was forcing me to leave them. So you can be a conservative in terms of wishing an ideal lifestyle, but you also can be confronted with the reality that life isn't that way. So no, I fully reject these attacks, and I think that Andrew and Rachel are doing more than fine. They seem like a very happy couple. So that is it for tonight, boys. Thank you for being here. Kevin Bacon says, I don't care if his wife is horrible. He just seems like a douche. Well, that is the orthodox effect. Oh, and Ty Rogerson says, I gave a 38-year-old an offer of insemination that will be ending in a few days just to call her bluff. Yes! Yes! We have to do more of this. Call their bluff. Any woman who comes to you and says, I couldn't find the right man. Men are so bad out there. No. There's plenty of sperm available right here in my pants.